Hey, good morning, everybody. We made it through 3 days of this NTI set. Uh, we're going to continue on talking about wool processing this morning. I'm going to just get right to it, kind of conserve your time. Couple of announcements. I've been getting everybody's work turned in via email. Things look pretty good. Just don't get lazy on me. If it says explain, please make sure that you're explaining what I'm asking for in the questions. If it says list, feel free to list those points. But if that I need an explanation, please go on to that next step and do that. As always, feel free to reach out to me via email. My turnaround time is about 15 or 20 minutes, and I'll try and stick to that. Just bear with me. I had some people yesterday didn't get a response fast enough, and then they asked Miss Kendrick, and by the time she circled back to me, I had already replied. So I was just confused about that. But, if you don't get an immediate response, give me 15 or 20 minutes, try and work on something else for another class. If it's been posted, hang tight, and I'll be right there with you. So today, we look at our objective, we're going to continue on with wool and wool processing. A couple of things that I wanted to circle back to yesterday that we didn't dwell on enough, I think. When we talk about wool, I mentioned that it is naturally fire resistant and used to be in your chemistry labs, and I think is still the case here, at least the last time I talked to Ms. Farr, it was, there is a fire safety blanket, and that fire safety blanket is made of wool. And in the event of an emergency fire in the lab, you can actually take that blanket, spread it out, and suffocate the fire. It will not just ignite like cotton or some of your synthetic fibers will. Now, we are seeing a transition from wool into fiberglass. Fiberglass mat doesn't burn. It'll actually smother out the fire as well. But wool is used as a natural fire resistant material. Lots of fireman jackets are still manufactured with a wool lining, and a wool blanket's a really good thing to have in your house. Heaven forbid, in the event of a fire, you could actually wrap up in that and get out and limit any burns that you might get if you had to get close to the flames. So, it's not going to protect you from the standpoint of being invincible, but it is something that could help. Guys that shear sheep, they love it. They actually, for whatever reason, they're called top guns. And if you go to Australia, the largest sheep producing country in the world, next to China and New Zealand, those are your top three. There are guys that shear sheep all year long. And we talked about being able to earn about $5 a head per sheep. These guys will do 20,000 sheep each a year. So you stand to make quite a bit of money if you're good and you're fast and something you're interested in. The other side of it, though, is that you have to have sheep to do it. And Kentucky just doesn't offer, I think, the sheep population in order to make it a full-time income. Now, you could travel. I have friends that travel across the country shearing sheep, and they make their living doing that. So, it's something that if you're interested in, by all means, it can be something that you can move into and transition into full time. So these guys that shear sheep, they get very competitive with it. And there are two types of sheep shearing competitions. One is the fastest sheep shearing. And from my standpoint, this is a very subjective contest because there are so many factors that play into it. The size of the sheep, the temperament of that sheep. Is she going to flail? Her fleece or how her fleece is made up. Temperature can greatly affect the shearing ability of a sheep. So if it's warm outside, then those fibers are going to be loose. If it's colder outside, then those fibers are going to be more dense. So there's definitely a difference there. But this gentleman here, Ivan Scott, he breaks the world record, and we'll watch a segment of this, but this is a single sheep shearing contest for the fastest record.
Fastest time to shear one sheep. Ivan, in your own time, please start.
So electric shears, this is a mechanical setup. you'll notice that he has the sheep positioned on her butt, or what we call her rump, and he shears the belly, and then he just goes down and around the back. And you can see that he actually forfeits some time there because this ewe is squirming a little bit, but going through the process, he just rolls right through. So, sheep shearing is not just having the ability to use that machine, the shears, but it's also the comfort of the ewe. It's also making sure that you are quickly and swiftly removing that fleece. So if we put the sound back on, they tell us
the record time to beat was 39.31 seconds. Ivan, you achieved a time of 37.90.
37.9. Now, when we compare that to the other type of sheep shearing, there are these endurance shears. So they give contestants an 8-hour window, which would represent a typical work day, and then they see if that, or how many sheep you can shear in that window. So this gal, who's a Canadian, Pauline Bole, she participated in the World Sheep Shearing Contest down in New Zealand this last December, and she had 510 sheep in 8 hours. And when we listened to that old guy Balderson yesterday tell us about the sheep shearing process in the YouTube video, he said that he was doing well to do 100 in a day. And I would say 100 to 130 is pretty average when you talk to people. But if you do the math, guys, that's $500-$600 for a day's worth of work. That's pretty good. So again, if it's something you're interested in, it could be something worth pursuing. When we talk about sheep shearing, we've got the primary part of the tool that we utilize is that electric shear, and that electric shear has a head on it that moves back and forth extremely fast. And in that shear, the top part that moves is called the cutter, and this acts like scissors or a hay mower. And you have on the bottom, I'm trying to find my camera here, you have this comb that stays stationary, and then you have this cutter that moves back and forth, and it goes so fast that as you pass it over the fleece of the sheep, it just removes it from the body in a swift cutting action. So if you're wondering how that works, that's the mechanical part of it. Let's see. Once the fleece is removed, it then goes to a processing mill, and we'll take a look at how that mill works this morning. So this is a pretty interesting video. We're not going to watch all 5 minutes of it, but we'll go through.
We saw sheep being sheared last summer. The bales of wool are now being delivered to the wool marketing board. Here, the wool will be graded and sold. Look out! The bales of wool are first unloaded. The bales are then weighed so the farmer can be paid for the weight he has delivered. The wool at this stage is called greasy wool. It is full of the natural grease sheep produce to make the fleece waterproof.
So, grease wool, also known as raw wool, is the first product. And if we were in class at school, I'd pass this around. But what we've got here is just this dirty wool. Essentially, it was shorn off a sheep and put into a bag. And if we could feel our hands, it's got that lanolin oil in it. If we smell it, it smells like lanolin. You can actually see, if I can get up close enough, we've got some dirt in there. This dirt, through the scouring process, will be removed, and it'll make that wool nice and clean. But raw wool or grease wool.
Plus lots of contamination, such as dirt, dead skin, sweat residue, pesticide. The fleeces are first sorted and graded. The wool graders are expert at this, having trained for 5 years. We could give them a fleece and they would be able to tell us what breed of sheep it was from and what the wool would be best used for. This is important as different breeds of sheep produce different types and quality of wool, which is suitable for different uses. Once sorted, the wool is then packed into bales of graded wool.
I'm going to skip ahead a minute here too. They just show us how
400 kilograms is then tested for fineness and colour. The graded.
So once that wool is baled, it's tested for fineness. Fineness is the diameter of the fiber, and you're going to use a reading today to kind of look at how we measure that diameter. So that'll be one of your tasks for today.
The wool is then sold at all quiet,
so they sell.
Being sold, the greasy wool is taken to Haworth scouring, where it undergoes its first treatments. Different grades of wool are mixed to give the right blend for the end product. The first treatment is scouring, which involves washing, rinsing, and then drying the wool. It goes through 8 washes, and 1,000 tons a day can be washed.
Now, one thing you'll notice here, a lot of that wool is white, and white wool has a major advantage to colored wool, black wool. And when I say colored wool, we have some sheep that will have more of a brown colored fleece, or sheep that'll have a very, very dark black fleece. White, we have an infinite color palette that we can dye that wool. Reds, pinks, yellows, greens, everything in between on the color wheel. Black, brown, you're limited to what you can color it. So there is a huge advantage from the producer's standpoint for sheep that have a white fleece. So we're at a scouring plant. They're going to wash this wool about 8 times during the washing process. Each time that lanolin is rinsed out, oil separates from water. So we then remove that lanolin, that oil, and it is then treated, and it's collected, and then we use it as the byproduct.
It removes most of the grease and other impurities, such as mud, seeds or thorns, which can be picked up by sheep when out in the fields. The grease which comes out of the wool is called lanolin. It is cleaned and purified and used in face and hand cream. The scoured wool is dried. It is now clean and white, but very tangled. This clean wool is sucked up by this giant vacuum cleaner and packed into bales ready for the next process.
So from there it goes to the mill, where there is this machine called a card that's essentially a bunch of little staples that move across the wool, and they straighten out the fiber.
The tangled wool is then passed through a carding machine, which is a series of rotating rollers covered with pointed wire or teeth. It's the tufts of wool into individual fibres and removes odd pieces of hay and straw which may remain. If the wool is going to be used for making woolen items such as jumpers and other clothes, or for carpet, then it will be spun. If the wool is going to be used for cloth, then it is combed.
So at this point here, we now have this clean product, and what we have here is just a piece of wool that has been processed and spun into a roving. So it is white, it is clean, and we could then take that fiber and we can stretch it and spin it, and that is how we get from that raw product to the roving, and then that is spun into yarn to make clothing or carpeting or drapes or insulation and firemen's jackets. So very interesting process, and one that I like, one that I feel very close to because I like sheep a lot. So with that, what I'd like you to do now, guys, today is answer the questions on our animal science set, which is right here. So we've got our flashback, and then there is a catalog that I have posted on the Google site that I want you to read through, pages 2 and 3. and it talks about the 3 different rating systems for sheep wool. And I want you to summarize how those systems are different. So essentially, what is the system's name, and then what is it? So give me how they are different. And from there, we're going to move into sheep breeds. If you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to me via email. Otherwise, we'll see you on Monday. Everybody have a good weekend. Stay inside and stay safe. We will talk soon.